I live in the middle of nowhere. My house is surrounded by farm fields and my neighbors are far from me. I live in Ontario, Canada, and our winters can be pretty rough. My husband would occasionally work away. He would leave on Sunday and come home Friday. I have a Rottweiler Bullmastiff cross that hates strangers and is protective, so I was never really afraid of someone breaking in. It was the middle of winter and it was a snowstorm. It was late Saturday night and I was sleeping because I had to work at 7 a.m. It's after midnight. I'm in my bed sleeping. My dog is at the foot of my bed snoring and I hear a knock at my door. I'm startled and wake up. My dog sits up, and I think to myself I must be dreaming. So I'm drifting off and I hear a knock again. I brushed it off to I'm dreaming. I live in the middle of nowhere and it's a snowstorm in the middle of the night. I'm dreaming. I go back to sleep, wake up at 6 and run out to start my car and brush the snow off. I see footprints. Footprints that come across my yard up to my door and around the windows around the house. It was fresh snow, so they were clearly from the middle of the night. I was creeped out for sure. In the heart of rural America, nestled between endless fields of corn and forgotten dirt roads, stood an old farmhouse that whispered of secrets and shadows. Its weathered boards creaked under the weight of decades, and its windows, like vacant eyes, stared out into the desolate landscape. The Johnson family, seeking solace from the chaos of city life, had purchased the farmhouse with dreams of a tranquil country existence. John, the father, was a tall man with a rugged demeanor, determined to fix up the old place despite its eerie reputation. His wife, Mary, an artist longing for inspiration, saw the farmhouse as a blank canvas awaiting her touch. Their young daughter, Emily, with her curious eyes and boundless imagination, skipped through the overgrown grass, eager to explore every nook and cranny. Yet from the moment they moved in, the farmhouse exuded a presence, an unsettling energy that seemed to grow with each passing day. At night, the wind moaned through the attic like a mournful spirit, and strange shadows danced along the walls. Mary began to hear faint whispers in the breeze, whispers that spoke of tragedy and loss. One evening, as Emily played in the backyard, she stumbled upon an old well half hidden by wildflowers. Intrigued, she peered into its depths and thought she heard a faint voice calling for help. Frightened, she ran to her parents, but when they investigated, they found nothing but the echoes of their daughter's fear. As weeks turned into months, the farmhouse's grip tightened. Objects moved of their own accord, doors slammed shut without warning, and Mary's paintings took on a haunting quality she couldn't explain. John, skeptical by nature, began to feel a chill in his bones whenever he walked the corridors alone. He tried to reassure his family, but even he couldn't deny the palpable sense of unease that pervaded their once hopeful home. One stormy night, the farmhouse revealed its darkest secret. Emily, unable to sleep, wandered downstairs to find solace in her father's arms. As she reached the bottom step, a figure materialized, a specter with hollow eyes and a tattered dress. The ghostly apparition floated towards Emily, emitting a mournful wail that chilled the air. John and Mary, awakened by their daughter's scream, rushed to her side. Together, they watched in horror as the ghostly figure spoke through Emily, recounting a tale of betrayal and tragedy that had cursed the farmhouse for generations. The spirit, a young woman named Sarah, had been wronged by her own family and left to die in the well where Emily had heard her cries. Determined to free Sarah's soul, John and Mary unearthed long-buried secrets and righted past wrongs. With each act of restitution, the farmhouse's malevolent presence slowly dissipated, replaced by a sense of peace that had long eluded its halls. Years later, the Johnsons looked back on their time in the farmhouse with a mixture of awe and disbelief. They had survived a haunting that tested their beliefs and bound them closer together. As they stood outside the restored farmhouse, now filled with warmth and laughter, they knew they would never forget the chilling whispers of its past or the resilient spirit that had guided them through the darkness. Alone in the old Victorian house on Maple Street, Amy felt a chill crawl up her spine as the last glimmer of sunlight faded behind the towering trees. Her parents had unexpectedly left for a weekend getaway, leaving her with strict instructions to lock all the doors and windows and to not answer the door for anyone. They had warned her about the rumors that circulated in town about the house being haunted, but Amy had always dismissed them as mere superstition. As darkness enveloped the house, Amy retreated to the living room, clutching her phone like a lifeline. The antique furniture seemed to loom in the shadows, their polished surfaces reflecting the dim light of a single lamp. Outside, the wind whispered through the branches, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Amy tried to distract herself with a movie on her laptop, but every creak and groan of the old house sent a shiver down her spine. She glanced nervously at the staircase leading to the second floor, half expecting to see a shadowy figure lingering at the top. Just as she was about to turn off the movie and retreat to her bedroom, she heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping coming from somewhere upstairs. Amy froze, her heart racing in her chest. She strained to listen, but the tapping had stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Deciding it was just her imagination, Amy tried to calm herself. She checked all the locks on the doors and windows, making sure everything was secure. As she turned away from the last window, she caught a glimpse of movement in the backyard, a fleeting shadow darting between the trees. Fear gnawed at her insides, but she told herself it was probably just a raccoon or a trick of the light. She hurried back to the living room and resumed watching her movie, trying to drown out the growing sense of unease. Hours passed in tense silence until a sudden knock at the front door shattered the stillness. Amy jumped in her seat, her heart pounding. Who could be knocking at this hour? Hello? Is anyone home? A voice called from outside. Amy's parents had been clear, she wasn't supposed to answer the door for anyone. She held her breath, hoping whoever it was would go away. The knocking persisted, more urgent now. Please, I need help. It's an emergency. Fear mingled with curiosity, and against her better judgment, Amy crept toward the door, peering through the peephole. On the porch stood a woman in tattered clothes, her face obscured by shadows. Her outstretched hand trembled as she knocked again. Amy's pulse raced. Should she open the door to help? Or should she listen to her parents' warning and stay hidden? Before she could decide, a sudden crash echoed from upstairs, the unmistakable sound of breaking glass followed by hurried footsteps. Panic seized Amy as she realized someone else was in the house with her. Adrenaline surged through her veins as she sprinted to the kitchen and grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet. Heart pounding, she crept toward the staircase, her ears straining for any sound. The house seemed to hold its breath, waiting. As she reached the top of the stairs, Amy saw a figure dart into her parents' bedroom. With trembling hands, she raised the skillet, ready to defend herself. She took a deep breath and pushed open the bedroom door. Inside, the room was empty save for a shattered window and a billowing curtain. Cold night air swept in, chilling Amy to the bone. She scanned the room, but there was no sign of an intruder. A sudden gust of wind slammed the door shut behind her, and Amy spun around in terror. In the mirror opposite her, she saw a reflection, a faint outline of a figure standing just behind her. She whirled around, swinging the skillet, but there was nothing there. Only the echo of her own panicked breaths filled the room. With trembling hands, Amy locked herself in her bedroom, clutching her phone tightly. She called the police, who arrived swiftly and searched the house from top to bottom. They found no one and nothing out of place, except for the broken window and the unsettled feeling that lingered in the air. Amy's parents returned the next morning to find her pale and shaken. She told them everything that had happened, but they assured her it was just her imagination playing tricks on her in the empty house. But Amy knew what she had seen and heard that night. The tapping, the shadow in the backyard, the mysterious figure in the mirror, they were all too real to be dismissed as mere imagination. And as she lay in bed that night, surrounded by the comforting presence of her parents, she couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen still lurked in the dark corners of the old Victorian house on Maple Street. I spent a week backpacking alone in the Grand Tetons last year. It was the day of my 20th birthday when I was about halfway through the trail, which means I was the farthest point into the backcountry and miles from any civilization. That day I hiked farther into the day than normal to cover as much distance as I could. This was a mistake, because when I reached the designated permit campsite areas, most were already taken. I continued on the trail before I reached something that kind of resembled a campsite. It was a small dirt area under a tree that sat adjacent to a tiny stream. I was uneasy about the spot, but it was getting too dark to find another one. I set up my tent and fell asleep alone in my small two-person tent right as the sun went down. A couple hours later, I woke to the sound of a twig snapping. I thought it was a squirrel or a marmot, so in a sleepy daze I hit the side of the tent to scare it off. Then there was a sound like something hit back. It frightened me, but I decided it must have been a branch or something that fell from the tree. I was still exhausted at that point and went back to sleep. Not long after I was woken by more twigs breaking, but this time they were noticeably steps and loud ones at that. I knew I was in bear country, but it was pitch black and I had the rain cover on and couldn't see anything. I hoped it was a deer and that it would wander off, and the sounds did stop. For a while. About 30 minutes later the same cracking sounds of twigs on the ground were moving the other direction. That's when it stopped and sniffed my tent. It had thunderous breaths and there was no doubt in my mind now that it was a bear. I had nowhere to run and all I had to defend myself with was a pocket knife and a can of bear spray. So I stayed up the rest of the night wide awake with both in my hands ready to defend myself. It stayed around my tent for 5 terrifying hours, infrequently walking, sniffing, and, at one point, scratching at my tent. It wasn't until the sun came up and the sound stopped that I had the courage to bolt out of my tent and as far away as I could get. When I looked back there was no sign of a bear, but when I finally returned to my campsite there were massive paw prints in the dirt surround it. It was the most terrifying night of my life. I was a young Boy Scout at one of my first summer camps. Every night we ate dinner in the large mess hall. On one of the nights, the staff wouldn't let us leave, because it was thunderstorming really bad outside. We sat and had to occupy ourselves for almost 3 hours before we could leave. Finally they said it was safe to leave, because the staff had not seen any lightning for over 30 minutes. My troop started walking back to our site, even though it was pitch black outside and still downpouring. Not 5 minutes after we left the mess hall, we saw a huge lightning strike stretch across the sky. But by this point, no one was willing to go back to that boring mess hall, so we continued to our site. Everyone in my troop huddled under an easy-up tent to protect ourselves from the heavy rain. Our campsite was on the outskirts of the camp with no other sites near us. No one but my troop should have been anywhere near our site, especially in this terrible storm. At some point we noticed a faint headlight moving slowly through the woods. We knew no one was supposed to be out there. The 2 youth leaders in charge, Drew and Michael, started calling out to the person asking who they were. All of a sudden, the light turned off. A moment later, a red light turned on and the glowing bulb sprinted away without saying a word. Naturally all of us younger scouts started going absolutely bonkers at what just happened. Drew and Michael told everyone to stay put and they would go out and see what was out there. After about 30 minutes they came back and told us it was only a scout. They said a kid got in trouble during the day and had to come clean up the area that night. I felt this was awfully suspicious. That story didn't seem real to me. Years later I asked Drew what actually happened that night. He told me they went searching in the woods, but found absolutely nothing. There was no one and no sign of anyone. They made up the story to calm us younger boys down. But the truth was, something was lurking in the woods that night. It got very close to our site, even though nothing should have been there. I am now 17 and I still have no idea who or what it could have been. For all I know, the creature could have just been silently watching us, but ran only when it was discovered. Had it been out there before? Will it return in the future? I have no way of knowing. where one of my childhood friends decided to stick Play-Doh in my very curly hair. She thought it was funny. I was absolutely mortified. There is another one that comes to mind as well. I went to a friend's birthday party and she had a hot tub. We were all hanging out in the hot tub and throwing around a beach ball. I got too hot and I was sitting on a steep edge. One of the girls surprised me and threw the ball at me and I went tumbling off the side of the hot tub and down some very sharp wooden steps. It hurt horribly. I was covered in bruises and I also had a headache all night from the heat of the tub. I was in so much pain. I think the final one that was terrible was a birthday party at a neighbor's house. We decided to play Truth or Dare. One of the girls dared another girl to dance with her clothes off. Then the girl who was hosting took a picture of her with a flash camera. Everything stopped and the girl was mortified and it started the night-long fight between all of the girls. I was freaked out and stopped talking and tried to go to sleep. But the girls wouldn't let me go to sleep. It was honestly one of the most disturbing parties that I had ever gone to. I never hung out with those girls again. I stayed at a friend's house and I woke up before he did. Like 7 or 8 a.m. His stepbrother was also awake and I went to use the bathroom. Noticed he was up set high as all three of us were hanging out all night. We ended up playing Twisted Metal Black in his room waiting for my friend to wake up. My friend eventually woke up and when he saw I was hanging out with his brother he lost his shit. Started screaming, crying, and punched a few holes in his bedroom door all the while screaming that I'm supposed to be his friend. His brother just told me to go to the kitchen. My friend at this point was on the phone with his dad still screaming and crying. Eventually gave me the phone and his dad told me I had to leave. So I had to call my dad and have him come pick me up. Never spoke to that kid again. His brother was chill, never saw him again either. We were like 10 or 11. Now here's the kicker. About 6 or so years later that same kid ended up burning down that house after his parents divorced and his mom passed away because he didn't want his dad to get the house. Fucking crazy. Earlier in 2016, I was having my very first sleepover with a friend of mine at the time. This was at his mother's house, where she no longer lives now. I was still 11 years old, he was a bit younger than me, he also had a younger brother living with him, and my friend didn't get along that well with his younger brother, he still does to this day. Anyway, my parents dropped me off there, we went bought lollies, he and I as well as his younger brother went to the nearby stadium, hung out there, we went to the playground of the school next to it and hung out there, my friend made me climb inside a bucket connected to a rope swing, and he dangerously pushed me so high, he was literally out of his mind, and then the bucket snapped off. I was not that happy with him after that, his younger brother was with us, he just watched and laughed, but I let him get away, he was innocent, he didn't really do anything wrong, it was mainly my friend. But that's only the beginning, there's lots more. It was nighttime at the house, me and my friend were watching a movie, his younger brother was in bed, I just wanted to bed. And this is the part where he began making me feel so uncomfortable, he challenged me to eat raw egg, it was so disgusting, he cut open tea bags and challenged me to eat the contents, it was disgusting, and it paid off, I couldn't eat any of the lollies we bought earlier until I did what he challenged me to do. But after that I just wanted to go to bed, but he just wouldn't let me sleep at all, and he started trolling me, by making me think the police was calling us and surrounding the house with some video or app on his tablet. I knew already he was trolling me, and then he turned zombie-like, and obviously it was fake, he was trying to troll me, but he did start feeling a little sick, he went to talk to his mother, and then had a shower. While he was at it, I just grabbed my sleeping bag and mattress and moved into his bedroom. He finished his shower and found me in his bedroom, and immediately agreed we'll just sleep in there. I felt so relieved, I could finally rest for the night properly. The next morning, we went over back to the living room, his younger brother joined us, they both started trolling me again, Well, his younger brother was more innocent, he didn't do very much. The three of us then went out to hang out the nearby stadium again, but then while there, my friend and his younger brother started getting into a heated argument again. My friend had to text his mum several times. And he was just in total rage with his younger brother. We decided we needed to leave the stadium. We departed from a back door, and once we were out, he told me to stay back while he just instant beat up his younger brother, which was actually pretty disturbing. He aggressively beat and wrestled his younger brother, and he was too young for that. He continued to treat his younger brother like a crybaby. His younger brother was powerless to do anything about it, because my friend was the boss. I couldn't do anything. When we got back to the house, his younger brother told his mum. She had to interview me about what happened. I had tell her everything right there in front of my friend. My friend was put away in his room for a while, and to compensate for what happened to his younger brother, he and I went out and hung out for a while my friend was put away in his room. That was actually a really nice part of the sleepover. After that, I went home. I was so glad to be home after all of this.